comes a time in every person's life when a hand of mercy is extended, a voice of truth speaks, and the weight of conviction settles upon the soul. You were that voice. You were not placed in the narcissist's life by accident. You were sent as a messenger, a beacon, a final opportunity for change. But what did they do? They scoffed. They ridiculed. They dismissed the warning, believing themselves above correction, immune to consequence. Pride swelled within them like a wave refusing to break, and they turned their back on the very lifeline sent to save them. It is the nature of a hardened heart to resist truth. When a soul has built its throne upon deception, to acknowledge truth is to witness the collapse of everything they have built. The narcissist, wrapped in the illusion of self-sufficiency, could not bear to admit need, weakness, or error. Yet, God does not force repentance. He does not shatter the will to make it yield. Instead, He offers. He warns. He places before a person both the light and the shadow, the path of wisdom and the path of destruction. And when they ignore it, He does not beg. He allows them to choose. But to ignore a final warning is not to escape it. It is to set in motion an inevitable reckoning. The rejected truth does not dissolve into nothingness. It lingers. It rises again at the appointed time, no longer as a gentle whisper, but as a consequence too great to deny. You may wonder if your role was in vain, if your presence, your love, your patience, and your words were wasted. No, they were not. The seeds of truth were planted, and though they did not take root in the heart of the narcissist, they stand as a witness against their refusal. Do not grieve over what seems like a lost cause. You were never meant to change them, only to warn them. The justice that follows is not your burden to bear. It belongs to the one who sent you, and He is never mocked, nor are His words ever spoken in vain. You were not placed in the narcissist's life by chance. Every encounter, every conversation, and every moment of connection had a purpose beyond what was immediately visible. You were sent as an instrument of divine intervention, a final beacon of light before the impending darkness of consequence. Your role was not simply to endure their actions or be another fleeting presence in their life. You were positioned as a living, breathing warning, a last opportunity for them to turn from their ways before it was too late. Throughout history, we see that God sends messengers in various forms. Some come as prophets, proclaiming truth to those who would rather not hear it. Others arrive as friends, offering gentle words of wisdom that go unheeded. And sometimes, a person is sent not to speak at all, but simply to be a reflection of what could be, a contrast to the darkness, a silent testimony to what they refuse to become. You were chosen for this task, not because you were perfect, but because you carried truth within you, and that truth could not be ignored. The narcissist's encounter with you was not an accident. It was a carefully orchestrated moment of divine grace, an undeserved opportunity for them to confront themselves. They saw, perhaps for the first time in a long while, a different way to live, one not driven by manipulation, deceit, or selfish ambition. Whether they admitted it or not, they recognized in you something foreign to them, sincerity, selflessness, and love that was not transactional. Your presence disrupted their carefully curated illusions, forcing them to wrestle with the reality that their way of living was not the only way, nor was it the right way. They were given a chance to change. They had before them a crossroads, to acknowledge the truth or to continue suppressing it. The discomfort they felt in your presence was not because of anything you did wrong, but because light always unsettles darkness. A person who has spent their life avoiding mirrors does not appreciate being shown their own reflection. Your words, your actions, your very existence in their life, these things acted as a mirror that exposed what they had long denied. Perhaps there were moments when you saw glimpses of recognition in their eyes, a brief pause in their usual defenses, a flicker of something real beneath the facade. Maybe, for a moment, they even entertained the thought of change. But the tragedy of the narcissist is that they believe they can defy even divine warnings. Their arrogance convinces them that consequences are for others, not for them. They mistake patience for permission, mercy for weakness. And so, rather than embrace the opportunity given to them, they rejected it. They rejected you. But their rejection was never truly about you. It was about what you represented, a final invitation to transformation that required them to forsake the very identity they had built. To accept your presence as a warning would mean admitting fault, acknowledging a need for change, and surrendering the illusion of control. This was a price they were unwilling to pay. What they failed to understand, however, was that divine warnings do not come endlessly. There is always a last one. They assumed, as many do, that they could continue as they were, that nothing would change, that they could silence the voice of truth and suffer no consequences. But the nature of final warnings is that they are just that, final. They ignored the warning, but the warning was not erased. It remains standing as an unshakable testimony that they were given a chance and refused it. Your role in their life was not meaningless. You were an instrument of divine mercy, sent not to force their hand, but to offer them one last opportunity to choose wisely. They turned away, but that does not negate the significance of your presence. Whether they recognized it or not, whether they ever admitted it or not, they encountered something through you that they could never truly forget. The narcissist was not unaware of the truth you carried. They saw it, felt it, and were confronted by it, yet they rejected it with a stubbornness that defied reason. They were not deceived in ignorance. They were willfully blind. The truth you represented was not hidden from them. It was placed before them in unmistakable clarity. They had every opportunity to listen, to reflect, to change, but they turned away. The rejection was not passive. It was deliberate. Truth, by its very nature, demands a response. When it enters a space dominated by deception, it forces a reckoning. The narcissist, whose life is built upon a fragile web of lies, cannot tolerate such an intrusion. To acknowledge truth would be to dismantle the very foundation upon which they have constructed their identity. It would mean admitting fault, confessing imperfection, and relinquishing control actions that their pride simply cannot allow. And so they choose the easier path: denial, dismissal, and deflection. The narcissist's mind is a fortress, heavily guarded against anything that threatens their self-image. Every word of wisdom you offered was met with resistance, not because it lacked merit, but because it required them to confront their own shortcomings. Their arrogance convinced them that they already possessed all knowledge, that they were beyond correction, that no one, least of all you, had the right to challenge them. They may have mocked your insights, belittled your concerns, or twisted your words to make you appear foolish, all in an effort to maintain their illusion of superiority. Even when confronted with undeniable proof of their wrongdoings, they found ways to justify their actions. Excuses flowed effortlessly from their lips. They rewrote reality to suit their narrative, convincing themselves that they were the victims, that you were the one in error, that any consequence they faced was unjust. They surrounded themselves with enablers, those who would reinforce their delusions, who would tell them only what they wanted to hear, who would never hold them accountable. Truth became an inconvenience they refused to entertain. Your presence in their life was a disruption. You were a mirror reflecting back to them the person they truly were, not the carefully curated image they wanted to believe in. They could not bear to look too long, so they shattered the mirror instead. They discredited you, twisted your intentions, and sought to invalidate your words so they could continue living without the weight of conviction pressing upon them. They did not reject you as an individual. They rejected what you represented, the last opportunity to turn back before it was too late. There were moments, perhaps, when they hesitated. A fleeting second where doubt crept in, where they considered that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong. But the discomfort was unbearable. To change would require effort. It would mean undoing years of self-deception, humbling themselves, making amends and facing the pain they had inflicted on others. This was too great a cost for them to pay. Instead, they silenced the doubt, reinforcing their defenses, convincing themselves that their way was the only way. The rejection of truth does not erase it. It lingers, echoing in the depths of their conscience, a whisper they cannot fully silence, no matter how much they try. They may push it aside, bury it beneath layers of arrogance and justification, but it remains. The consequences of ignoring it will unfold in due time. The truth they ran from will be the very thing that ultimately confronts them again. Only then it will not come as an opportunity for redemption, but as a judgment they cannot escape. Free will is a gift, but it is also a responsibility. Every person is given the ability to choose between right and wrong, truth and deception, humility and pride. God does not force transformation upon anyone. He presents the path. He extends the invitation. He offers the opportunity, but the choice remains with the individual. The narcissist, like all people, was given this same freedom. They were not beyond redemption, nor were they beyond the reach of grace. Yet they used their free will not to embrace change, but to reject it. The ability to choose is both a privilege and a test. With every choice, a person moves closer to light or deeper into darkness. The narcissist was confronted with truth, given a chance to step away from their destructive ways, yet they clung to their false sense of power. They saw the road before them, but they turned their back on it, not because they did not understand, but because the alternative required humility, and humility was an unbearable burden for them. There is no coercion in true transformation. God does not force repentance, for forced repentance is no repentance at all. The narcissist was given every reason to change, every sign pointing them in the right direction, but they exercised their free will to reject wisdom. They mistook patience for permission, believing that because no immediate consequence followed their actions, they were free to continue as they pleased. But every choice carries weight, and every decision has a consequence, whether delayed or immediate. A person's heart is shaped by the choices they repeatedly make. The narcissist did not become who they are overnight. Each small decision to lie rather than tell the truth, to manipulate rather than act with integrity, to prioritize self over others, hardened their heart a little more. They became conditioned to disregard conscience, to silence any inner voice that called them to accountability. By the time they encountered you, their patterns were deeply ingrained, but they were not yet beyond the point of return. They could still have chosen differently. The fact That they had free will does not mean they lacked responsibility for their choices. Free will does not absolve a person of accountability, it reinforces it. They had every resource to make a better choice, yet they turned away from it. No one could force them to do right, but that does not mean their wrongs will be without consequence. God allows people to walk their chosen paths, but He does not prevent the harvest of what they have sown. The narcissists' misuse of free will does not make free will itself unjust. It is a dangerous thing to be given power over one's own soul, and yet that is the very essence of humanity's design. A person can choose light or darkness, wisdom or foolishness, life or destruction. The narcissist was presented with this choice in a profound way. Through circumstances, through divine intervention. They were not abandoned to ignorance. They were given clarity, and still they chose deception. Their decision to reject truth was not made in confusion. It was a calculated choice, driven by fear of losing control. They equated change with weakness and accountability with defeat. To them, surrendering to truth meant losing their grip on power, and power was the only thing they truly worshiped. So they exercised their free will in defiance, clinging to their illusions with a desperation that only the deeply insecure can understand. A warning ignored is still a warning given. The fact that they did not accept it does not mean it was not real. They had the opportunity to choose differently, but they refused. Free will remains a double-edged sword. It allows for redemption, but it also allows for ruin. No one is forced toward destruction, but when destruction comes as a result of chosen actions, there is no one to blame but the one who made the choice. Warnings are acts of mercy, not cruelty. They exist to prevent disaster, to offer an escape before it is too late. God does not warn without reason, nor does He waste His efforts on those who have no chance of redemption. A final warning is never given in vain. It is given because change is still possible, because the door is not yet fully shut. But when a warning is ignored, it does not disappear, it transforms into judgment. The narcissist was given a warning, but they dismissed it as meaningless. They treated it as though it had no real weight, as if the opportunity for change would always be available to them. They assumed that life would continue uninterrupted, that consequences could always be avoided or manipulated away. They were wrong. There is a difference between delayed consequences and non-existent ones. Just because destruction does not come immediately does not mean it is not coming at all. Truth does not cease to be truth simply because someone refuses to accept it. The narcissist thought that by ignoring the warning they could undo it. They believed that by refusing to acknowledge it, they could erase it. But truth does not require agreement to remain true. The warning you gave them still stands, whether they recognize it or not. It is not dependent on their acceptance, nor is it weakened by their denial. They may have dismissed it, ridiculed it, or even used it against you, but none of that changes the reality that they were warned. When a person repeatedly ignores truth, their heart does not remain the same, it hardens. Every act of defiance strengthens their resistance to wisdom. The narcissist did not simply reject the warning once. They rejected it over and over, each time making it more difficult for them to turn back. What could have been a moment of awakening became another step toward destruction. A hardened heart is not an accident. It is the natural result of repeated choices to ignore truth. Consequences are not always immediate, but they are inevitable. The narcissist may have believed they escaped judgment because nothing seemed to happen right away. They may have convinced themselves that they were untouchable, that their actions carried no real repercussions. But there is no such thing as escaping the moral law of cause and effect. What is sown will eventually be reaped. A person may outrun accountability for a time, but they cannot outrun it forever. There is always a final moment when the last chance has passed. The narcissist assumed they had unlimited time, but they did not. There is a limit to mercy when it is continuously trampled upon. There is a point where opportunities for change cease, where the only thing left is the reckoning of what has already been done. When they ignored the warning, they sealed their own fate not because they were not given a choice, but because they continuously chose wrongly. The weight of a disregarded warning does not rest on the one who gave it. It rests on the one who ignored it. The narcissist may have blamed you, accused you, twisted your words, but the responsibility is theirs alone. You did what you were meant to do. You delivered the message, and they rejected it. Now, whatever follows is not your burden to carry. The outcome was never in your hands to begin with. The tragic irony is that the narcissist will one day recognize the truth they dismissed. Whether in this life or the next, there will come a moment when they see clearly what they ignored. They will realize that the warning was real, that the consequences could have been avoided, that they had the chance to change and they let it slip away. By the time they understand, it will no longer be a warning, it will be a reality they can no longer escape.